The Friday evening sun cast long shadows across the polished marble floor of the Bayshore Grand Hotel in Tampa. The lobby buzzed with the hum of voices, clinking luggage carts and the occasional burst of laughter from the nearby bar. It was the start of a holiday weekend, and the hotel staff moved with the frantic energy of people trying to stay one step ahead of chaos. Behind the front desk, 3 clerks darted between computer terminals, their faces fixed in professional smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. A line of guests snaked toward the entrance, some shifting impatiently from foot to foot, others staring at their phones with resigned expressions. Pam Bondi stepped through the revolving doors and paused, taking in the scene. She wore a simple navy pantsuit and practical low heels, her blonde hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun. Nothing about her appearance screamed important government official, and that was exactly how she wanted it. Just 3 days ago, she'd been in Washington, D.C., raising her right hand as she was sworn in as the United States Attorney General. The ceremony had been followed by a whirlwind of meetings, briefings, and press appearances. When she finally had a free weekend, she decided to fly home to Tampa rather than stay in her new D.C. apartment. "Might as well check on the family business while I'm here," she'd told her assistant, who had raised an eyebrow at the last-minute travel plans. The Bondi family had invested in the Bayshore Grand chain 5 years earlier, back when Pam was still Florida's Attorney General. Her brother had handled most of the details, but Pam maintained a significant ownership stake. She rarely visited the properties in an official capacity, preferring instead to drop in unannounced and experience them as a regular guest would. Tonight would be no different. Pam joined the check-in line, sliding her phone into her handbag. She could have bypassed the wait entirely with one phone call, but that wasn't the point of these visits. She wanted to see how things really worked when nobody knew who was watching. The man ahead of her in line shifted his weight, a sleeping toddler draped over his shoulder. His wife stood beside him, looking exhausted as she rummaged through a diaper bag. "I specifically requested adjoining rooms when I made the reservation 3 months ago," the man was saying to the clerk. "We have 3 kids. We can't all squeeze into one room." The clerk, a young man with a name tag reading Jeremy, tapped at his keyboard with an expression of bored indifference. "I'm showing only 1 room was confirmed, sir. We're fully booked for the holiday weekend. There's nothing I can do." The mother looked close to tears. "We drove 7 hours to get here. Where are we supposed to put the pack and play?" "The kids?" Jeremy shrugged. "You could try the Marriott down the street. They might have something." Pam watched as the couple reluctantly accepted the key cards for their single room and moved away from the desk, the mother now openly crying. She made a mental note of the interaction. Customer service had been a cornerstone of her family's business philosophy, or at least it was supposed to be. 2 more guests checked in ahead of her. One, a businesswoman in a crisp blazer, questioned charges on her folio from a previous stay. Jeremy again brushed off her concerns, suggesting she call the billing department on Monday if she wanted to dispute the charges. When it was finally Pam's turn, Jeremy barely looked up from his computer screen. "Checking in?" he asked, his tone making it clear this was his 1,000th time asking the question today. "Yes," Pam replied pleasantly. "Reservation under Bondi." Something about her last name should have registered with the clerk. It was, after all, on his paychecks, but Jeremy showed no sign of recognition as he typed. "I've got you down for 1 standard king room." 2 nights, he said, still not making eye contact. "Credit card and ID?" Pam slid her driver's license and credit card across the counter. As Jeremy processed her information, she glanced around the lobby again, noting several small issues. A water stain spreading on the ceiling near the elevators, a missing button on a bellhop's uniform, fingerprints smudged across the brass mail slots behind the desk. None of these problems was major on its own, but together they painted a picture of neglect that troubled her. This wasn't the standard the Bayshore Grand was supposed to maintain. "I noticed the couple ahead of me had some trouble with their room reservation," Pam commented casually as Jeremy swiped her credit card. "Seems like that could have been handled better." Jeremy's eyes flicked up for the first time, narrowing slightly. "We're at capacity. Nothing I could do. Perhaps offering a roll-away bed? Or checking to see if any suites were available as an upgrade option?" The clerk's expression soured. "Look, lady, it's been a long day. I don't need guests telling me how to do my job." Pam raised her eyebrows but kept her tone mild. "I understand you're busy. but I've also noticed several service issues just standing here for 20 minutes. I'd like to speak with the manager." Jeremy let out a barely concealed sigh and looked over his shoulder. "Hey, Melissa," he called. A woman in her early 30s with sleek dark hair appeared from the office behind the desk. She wore the hotel's standard black blazer with a silver name badge identifying her as Melissa Torres, front desk supervisor. "Problem?" she asked, her gaze bouncing between Jeremy and Pam. "This guest has some complaints about how we're running things," Jeremy said, making no attempt to hide his irritation. Melissa turned to Pam with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm sorry to hear you're having issues, ma'am. What can I help with?" Pam explained what she'd observed. The family with the room reservation problem, the guest with billing questions, and the maintenance issues she'd spotted around the lobby. As she spoke, Melissa's smile remained fixed, but her eyes grew increasingly cold. When Pam finished, the supervisor cleared her throat. "I appreciate your feedback, Ms. Bondi, but I can assure you we're handling things as efficiently as possible during an extremely busy check-in period. If you'd like to submit formal comments, there's a survey link on your receipt." Pam decided to push a little further. "Actually, I'm quite familiar with hotel operations. I'd be interested in taking a tour of the facilities while I'm here. I'm considering booking a large event in the coming months." Melissa's smile tightened. "I'm afraid tours are by appointment only, and our events coordinator isn't in today. Perhaps you could call next week to schedule something." "I understand, but since I'm already here, couldn't you make an exception? It would only take a few minutes of someone's time." The supervisor's professional veneer began to crack. "Ms. Bondi, we have a lobby full of guests waiting to check in. My staff is stretched thin as it is. I simply cannot spare anyone for an impromptu tour because you're interested in how we run things." From the corner of her eye, Pam noticed an older bellman glance in their direction. He was helping an elderly couple with their luggage, but something about the conversation at the front desk had caught his attention. "I see," Pam said, accepting her keycard from Jeremy. "In that case, I'll just take my room key for now. But I would still like to speak with the general manager before the end of my stay." Melissa's patience was clearly running thin. "The GM isn't available this weekend. As I suggested, you're welcome to leave comments on the guest satisfaction survey, or you can email our corporate office. Now, if you don't mind, we have other guests waiting." She gestured to the growing line behind Pam, making it clear the conversation was over. Pam picked up her small weekend bag and stepped away from the desk. She wasn't angry, not exactly. During her years as a prosecutor and as Florida's Attorney General, she'd developed a thick skin and a cool head. What she felt now was disappointment, mixed with resolve. She took her phone from her bag and was about to head toward the elevators when she heard someone call her name. "Ms. Bondi? Pam Bondi?" She turned to see the older bellman approaching, recognition lighting up his weathered face. Unlike the front desk staff, he clearly knew exactly who she was. And that's when things got interesting. The older bellman hurried toward Pam, his eyes wide with recognition. His name tag read Carlos, and unlike the younger staff members, the lines on his face suggested decades of hotel experience. "Ms. Bondi, I thought that was you," he said, his voice low but excited. "I've been working here since before your family bought into the chain. It's an honor to meet you in person." Pam smiled warmly at him. Finally, someone who understood who she was, though not in the way the front desk staff would soon discover. "It's nice to meet you, Carlos. How long have you been with Bayshore Grand?" "Going on 22 years now, ma'am. Started back when this place was still called the Tampa Bay Regency. I've seen owners come and go, but things changed for the better when your family came on board. At least," his voice trailed off and he glanced toward the front desk where Melissa was watching them with suspicious eyes. "At least they did for a while," Pam finished for him. "What's changed recently?" Carlos hesitated, clearly uncomfortable speaking ill of his workplace. "New management," he finally said. "The regional director brought in his own team about 6 months ago. Cut staff, cut corners," he lowered his voice further. "A lot of the old-timers have quit. I'm just hanging on until retirement next year." Pam's disappointment deepened. This wasn't just about one rude clerk or an overwhelmed supervisor. The problems ran deeper than she'd initially thought. "Carlos, I'd like to hear more, but I don't want to get you in trouble. Is there somewhere we could talk privately?" The bellman nodded. "The staff break room should be empty this time of evening. Most everyone's on the floor during check-in rush." As they started walking away from the front desk, Melissa's voice called out sharply, "Carlos, the Williamson party needs help with their bags in the north wing." The bellman turned, hesitating. "I was just—" "Now please," Melissa cut him off. "We don't pay you to chat with guests." Pam could see the conflict on Carlos's face. "It's all right," she told him quietly. "We'll talk later. Room 712. Carlos nodded and reluctantly headed off toward the north wing. Pam watched him go, then turned to find Melissa approaching her, professional smile back in place but eyes cold as ice. "Ms. Bondi, I couldn't help noticing you were distracting our staff. As I mentioned, we're extremely busy tonight. If you need assistance with your luggage, I can call another bellman. But Carlos is assigned elsewhere at the moment." The forced politeness barely masked the supervisor's irritation. Pam had faced down courtroom opponents with far more intimidating demeanors during her years as a prosecutor. This didn't even register on her scale. "That won't be necessary," Pam replied calmly. "Carlos is an old friend. We were just catching up, I see. Well, the elevators are that way if you'd like to go to your room now." Melissa gestured toward the bank of elevators, making it clear this wasn't a suggestion. Pam considered her options. She could reveal her identity right now. Watch the color drain from Melissa's face as the realization hit. It would be satisfying, she was human after all. But it wouldn't solve the underlying problems. Besides, she wanted to gather more information before making herself known. "Actually, I think I'll have a drink at the bar first," she said, nodding toward the hotel's lobby lounge. "It's been a long week." Before Melissa could respond, Pam turned and walked toward the bar, feeling the supervisor's eyes boring into her back. The Bayshore Grand's lounge was one of the hotel's selling points, all dark wood, brass fixtures, and leather seating. At least that much remained unchanged. She took a seat at the bar, setting her weekend bag on the stool beside her. The bartender, a middle-aged woman with streaks of gray in her dark hair, approached with a practiced smile. "What can I get for you this evening?" she asked, setting down a cocktail napkin. "Sparkling water with lime, please," Pam replied. She needed to keep a clear head tonight. As the bartender prepared her drink, Pam glanced around the lounge. Like the lobby, it showed subtle signs of decline. A tear in the leather of a nearby booth, water rings on wooden tables that should have been polished, dust gathering on the bottles displayed on higher shelves. The bartender returned with her sparkling water. Her name tag read Dina. "Rough check-in?" Dina asked with a knowing look. "I saw you talking to Melissa. She's been on the warpath all week." "You could say that," Pam replied, taking a sip of her water. "Is she always so abrupt with guests?" Dina glanced over her shoulder before leaning in. "Between you and me, she's been impossible since they promoted her 3 months ago. Half the staff is looking for other jobs. That's concerning. This used to be one of the best hotels in Tampa. Tell me about it. I've been behind this bar for 15 years. Used to be proud to work here." Dina straightened up as another guest approached the bar. "Don't quote me on any of that," she added with a wink. For the next half hour, Pam sipped her water and observed. She watched a family with small children enter the restaurant only to be turned away, because they didn't have reservations, despite several empty tables visible from the entrance. She saw a guest complain about the Wi-Fi being down in the east wing, only to be told to try again later. She noticed housekeeping, staff rushing through the lobby with barely stocked carts. Everything. She saw confirmed what Carlos had hinted at. The hotel was being mismanaged, likely in an effort to cut costs and increase short-term profits. As a prosecutor, Pam had learned to gather evidence before making her case. That's exactly what she was doing now. She was about to ask for her check when she spotted a familiar face entering the lobby. Richard Hartwell, the regional director for the hotel chain, strode through the front doors in an expensive suit, flanked by 2 men Pam didn't recognize. All 3 were laughing loudly, clearly already several drinks into their evening. Pam had met Hartwell exactly twice at shareholders' meetings. He was competent but overly ambitious, the type who valued financial reports more than guest satisfaction scores. She'd had reservations when he was promoted to regional director, but her brother had assured her Hartwell knew the business inside and out. Apparently, knowing the business didn't translate to running it well. She watched as Hartwell bypassed the front desk entirely and headed straight for the hotel restaurant, the maitre d' scrambling to accommodate him and his companions despite the family that had been turned away minutes earlier. Pam turned back to the bar, her mind made up. She paid her bill. leaving Dina a generous tip and headed for the elevators. It was time to make some phone calls. Room 7112 was a standard king room with a partial view of Tampa Bay. Nothing special, though it would have cost a guest upwards of $400 for the night. Pam set her bag on the luggage rack and did a quick inspection. The room was clean enough, but like the rest of the hotel, showed signs of corner cutting. Thin towels, generic toiletries, a single bottle of water instead of the customary pair. She pulled out her phone and dialed her brother's number. "Brad, it's me," she said when he answered. "I'm at the Tampa Bayshore Grand. We need to talk about Richard Hartwell." She spent the next 20 minutes filling her brother in on everything she'd observed. As the family's main representative on the hotel chains board, Brad needed to know how their investment was being managed or mismanaged, in this case. "This isn't just about bad customer service," she explained. "It's about the brand we've built. The reputation of these hotels reflects on our family name." Brad agreed, promising to set up an emergency board meeting for Monday. But Pam wasn't satisfied with waiting. "I'm here now," she said, "and I intend to do something about it tonight." Just as she ended the call with her brother, there was a soft knock at her door. Pam checked the peephole to find Carlos standing in the hallway, looking nervously over his shoulder. She opened the door. "Carlos, come in." The bellman stepped inside, removing his cap respectfully. "I'm sorry to bother you, Ms. Bondi, but I thought you should know. Mr. Hartwell is downstairs with some investors. They're talking about selling off the Tampa property." "Selling?" Pam's eyebrows shot up. "That would require board approval." "Yes, ma'am, but they're acting like it's already decided. I overheard them in the elevator when I was bringing up luggage. They don't know I understand Spanish. They were speaking freely, thinking no one could understand." Pam's prosecutor instincts kicked into high gear. "Tell me everything you heard, Carlos. Don't leave anything out." As Carlos relayed the conversation, details about secret meetings, cooked books, and plans to strip the hotel of assets before selling it off, Pam's disappointment turned to cold anger. This wasn't just bad management. If what Carlos was saying was true, it was fraud. And if there was one thing Pam Bondi didn't tolerate, it was fraud. She thanked Carlos for the information and assured him his job was safe. More than safe, in fact. Then she made another call, this time to the hotel's general manager, a man named Thomas Bailey, who was conveniently unavailable, according to Melissa. "Tom? It's Pam Bondi." "Yes, that Pam Bondi. I'm in room 712 and we need to talk. Now." She ended the call and straightened her jacket, a familiar pre-courtroom ritual that centered her. Then she headed for the door. It was time to reveal who was really the boss at Bayshore Grand. Pam rode the elevator down to the lobby, her mind racing with everything Carlos had told her. If Hartwell was planning to sell the Tampa property without board approval, he wasn't just overstepping his authority, he was potentially breaking the law. The doors opened, and she stepped into a lobby that was markedly quieter than before. The check-in rush had subsided, leaving just a few guests milling about. Jeremy was still at the front desk, now scrolling through his phone when he thought no one was watching. Melissa was nowhere to be seen. Pam walked directly to the desk. When Jeremy noticed her approaching, he quickly pocketed his phone and forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Can I help you, Ms. Bondi?" he asked, his tone making it clear he hoped the answer was no. "I'm looking for Thomas Bailey," she replied. "I just spoke with him on the phone. He should be expecting me." Jeremy's expression shifted slightly, surprise maybe or concern. "Mr. Bailey doesn't usually meet with guests after hours." "He's making an exception," Pam said simply. I'll see if he's available." Jeremy picked up the desk phone and dialed an extension, turning slightly away as he spoke in hushed tones. While she waited, Pam noticed a young couple at the other end of the desk, clearly distressed as they spoke with another clerk. Their voices carried across the quiet lobby. "But we confirmed the honeymoon package 3 times, the woman was saying, her voice tight with disappointment. "We've been planning this for a year." The clerk, a young woman whose name tag read Tina, looked genuinely apologetic but shook her head. "I'm sorry, but I don't see that package on your reservation. I can offer you the standard room you booked, or..." "The standard room doesn't have the view we paid for," the groom interrupted. "It doesn't have the champagne or the flower petals or any of the things your website promised. This is our honeymoon." Pam felt her jaw tighten. Another failure of service, another disappointed guest. How many people had saved for months, perhaps years, for a special experience at this hotel, only to have their memories tainted by indifference? Jeremy hung up the phone and turned back to her. Mr. Bailey says he can give you 5 minutes in his office. Down that hallway, last door on the left. He pointed toward a corridor behind the front desk, his expression suggesting he was glad to be rid of her. Thank you, Pam replied, then nodded toward the distressed honeymooners. Those guests seem to be having a problem with their reservation. You might want to help your colleague fix it. Before Jeremy could respond, she walked around the desk and down the corridor toward the general manager's office. Bailey was a man in his 50s with salt and pepper, hair and the perpetually tan look of someone who spent his weekends on golf courses. He'd been with the hotel chain for nearly a decade, working his way up from food and beverage director to general manager of what was supposed to be their flagship property. As Pam entered, he rose from behind his desk with a plastic smile that faltered when he realized who she was. Ms. Bondi, he said, extending his hand. This is unexpected. When you called, I didn't realize it was actually you. Who did you think it was? She asked, shaking his hand firmly. Well, with your recent confirmation as Attorney General, I assumed it was someone using your name to get attention. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. Please sit down. What brings you to Tampa? And to our hotel? Pam remained standing. I think you know why I'm here, Tom. The Bayshore Grand is falling apart under your management. Bailey's smile disappeared entirely. That's a strong accusation. It's not an accusation. It's an observation. In the 2 hours I've been here, I've witnessed multiple service failures, maintenance issues, and a general attitude of indifference from your staff. She paused, watching his reaction. And now I hear Richard Hartwell is in the restaurant discussing selling this property. Without board approval? The color drained from Bailey's face. Where did you hear that? Does it matter? Is it true? Bailey sank back into his chair, suddenly looking every bit his age. It's complicated. Uncomplicated for me, Pam said, finally taking the seat across from him. I'm a prosecutor, Tom. I've spent my career untangling complicated situations. For a moment, he seemed to consider stonewalling her. Then his shoulders slumped. Hartwell brought in new investors about 6 months ago, people with deep pockets who wanted quick returns. He promised them a 30% profit margin, which is unheard of in the hotel business unless you gut operations and sell off the assets, Pam finished for him. Bailey nodded. He replaced half the management team with his own people, cut staff by 40%, eliminated training programs, reduced amenities, switched to cheaper suppliers, all while raising room rates. And you went along with this? Bailey at least had the decency to look ashamed. I objected at first. Hartwell made it clear my options were to play ball or find another job. I've got 3 kids in college, Ms. Bondi. I couldn't afford to walk away. Pam understood the dilemma, even if she didn't respect his choice. And the sale? What do you know about that? Only that Hartwell's been meeting with potential buyers for weeks. Today's group is from a Chinese investment firm. They're not interested in running a hotel. They want the real estate. Prime waterfront property in downtown Tampa. How far along are these discussions? I think they're finalizing terms tonight. Hartwell hinted that an announcement would be coming next week. Pam stood up. Where are they meeting right now? Private dining room off the main restaurant. But Miss Bondi, I don't think you should. She was already heading for the door. Thank you for your honesty, Tom, late as it is. What are you going to do? He called after her. She paused in the doorway. My job. Protecting the public from fraud. The hotel restaurant was nearly full. Weekend diners enjoying overpriced steaks and seafood, unaware of the drama unfolding in their midst. Pam walked confidently past the host stand, ignoring the maitre d's attempt to stop her. Ma'am, do you have a reservation? I don't need one, she replied without slowing down. She knew the layout of the restaurant well. She'd reviewed the architectural plans when her family first invested in the chain. The private dining room was through a set of frosted glass doors at the back, offering views of Tampa Bay through floor-to-ceiling windows. As she approached, she could hear male voices and laughter from inside. She caught a glimpse through the glass. Hartwell at the head of the table gesturing grandly as he spoke to 4 men in business suits. Papers and tablets were scattered across the table alongside half-empty wine glasses and dessert plates. Pam took a deep breath, channeling the same focus she'd used when walking into high-stakes courtrooms. Then she pushed open the door. The conversation stopped abruptly. 5 pairs of eyes turned toward her. "I'm sorry, this is a private meeting," said one of the men, rising slightly from his chair. Hartwell's expression shifted from confusion to recognition to alarm in the span of 3 seconds. "Pam," he said, forcing a smile as he stood. "What a surprise. I didn't know you were in town." "Clearly," she replied coolly. "Otherwise, you might not have been so bold as to sell off assets that don't belong to you." A ripple of unease passed through the men at the table. One of them, older than the others with steel-rimmed glasses, spoke in accented English. "Mr. Hartwell, who is this woman?" Before Hartwell could answer, Pam stepped forward. "My name is Pamela Bondi. My family owns a controlling interest in the Bayshore Grand Hotel chain, and nothing gets sold without our approval." The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. The potential buyers exchanged glances, their body language shifting from relaxed to alert. "There seems to be a misunderstanding," Hartwell said, his voice tight. "We were just discussing potential opportunities, not finalizing any deals." Pam nodded toward the papers on the table. "Those look like contracts to me." "Preliminary paperwork only," Hartwell insisted, moving to gather the documents. Pam was faster. She picked up the closest folder and flipped it open. Even upside down, she recognized a sales agreement when she saw one. Her years as Florida's Attorney General hadn't been spent shuffling papers. She'd prosecuted complex financial crimes and knew exactly what she was looking at. "Fully executed sales contract, dated tomorrow," she read aloud. "Signature lines for Richard Hartwell as authorized agent of Bayshore Grand Hotels, Inc. Which you are not, Richard. Not for a sale." The older man with the glasses stood, addressing his colleagues in rapid Mandarin. Though Pam didn't speak the language, his tone made his displeasure clear. The other men began gathering their things. "Gentlemen, please," Hartwell said, his composure cracking. "This is just a minor internal misunderstanding." "It's fraud," Pam corrected him. "And as the current Attorney General of the United States, I take fraud very seriously." At the mention of her title, the Chinese businessman moved even more quickly to leave. The older man paused beside Pam on his way out. "We were unaware of any irregularities," he said stiffly. "Our firm does not participate in unauthorized transactions." When the door closed behind the last of them, Hartwell's false smile vanished. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" he hissed. "That was a $50 million deal." "A fraudulent $50 million deal," Pam countered, unmoved by his anger. "Did you really think you could sell off a hotel property without the board's knowledge? Without the majority shareholders finding out? You're hardly ever involved in day-to-day operations," he shot back. "Your family collects the dividends while people like me do the real work. Is that what you call it, work? Cutting staff, reducing services, turning a 4-star hotel into a glorified motel with premium prices." She gestured toward the door. "I've seen enough tonight to know exactly what kind of work you've been doing." Hartwell's face flushed with anger. "You can't just walk in here and—" "I can and I did," Pam interrupted. "And now we're going to walk out together and continue this conversation with hotel security present. After that, the board will decide your fate." As if on cue, the door opened and Thomas Bailey entered, followed by a man in a security uniform. "Everything all right in here, Ms. Bondi?" Bailey asked, looking nervously between her and Hartwell. "No, Tom, everything is not all right," she replied, "but it will be." The next hour passed in a blur of activity. Pam, with the help of hotel security, escorted Richard Hartwell to a small conference room near the lobby. She'd called her brother Brad again, putting him on speakerphone as they confronted the regional director with evidence of his scheme. "You've got nothing concrete," Hartwell insisted, his earlier arrogance replaced by nervous energy. He kept glancing at his phone, which Pam had asked him to place on the table. "This is all just a misunderstanding." "The sales contract with tomorrow's date isn't a misunderstanding," Pam replied calmly. "Neither are the financial reports you've been sending the board, which conveniently failed to mention your staffing cuts and maintenance deferrals." On the speakerphone, Brad's voice was sharp with anger. "We trusted you, Richard. My father introduced you to our family. He vouched for you." Hartwell's face flushed. "Your father understood business. He knew sometimes you have to make tough decisions to stay competitive." Tough decisions, yes, Brad replied. Illegal ones, no. As they spoke, Pam noticed Hartwell's phone screen lighting up with incoming messages. One name caught her eye: Melissa Torres, the front desk supervisor who had been so dismissive earlier. You're working with Melissa, Pam said suddenly, the pieces falling into place. That's why she tried so hard to get rid of me when I started asking questions. Hartwell's expression confirmed her suspicion before he could deny it. She's been helping you identify assets to strip from the hotel, Pam continued. That's why she was promoted so quickly, isn't it? Not because of her customer service skills, which I can attest are sorely lacking. This is ridiculous, Hartwell muttered, but his protest lacked conviction. I think we need to have a chat with Ms. Torres as well, Pam said, nodding to the security officer. Could you please ask her to join us? While they waited, Pam stepped outside the conference room to collect her thoughts. The hotel lobby had quieted as the evening wore on, with just a few guests passing through on their way back from dinner or shows. At the front desk, Jeremy was still on duty, looking bored and checking his watch frequently. Pam felt a tap on her shoulder and turned to find Carlos, the bellman who had first recognized her. Ms. Bondi, he said quietly. I just finished my shift, but I wanted to check if you needed anything else before I go. She smiled at him gratefully. Actually, Carlos, I do. Would you mind waiting a few minutes? I think I'll need someone who knows the real history of this hotel. Carlos nodded, his expression serious. Of course. I'll be right over there. He gestured to a seating area near the elevators. When Pam returned to the conference room, Melissa had arrived, looking confused and alarmed to find her boss being questioned. The front desk supervisor's professional demeanor had cracked, revealing the nervousness beneath. What's going on? She asked, looking between Hartwell and Pam. Mr. Bailey just told me to come here immediately. Have a seat, Ms. Torres, Pam said, gesturing to an empty chair. We're discussing some irregularities in hotel operations. Mr. Hartwell seems to think you might be able to help clarify things. Melissa shot Hartwell a panicked look, which he answered with a slight shake of his head. The silent communication spoke volumes. I'm not sure what you mean, Melissa said carefully. I'm just a front desk supervisor. A front desk supervisor who was promoted over more experienced staff shortly after Mr. Hartwell took over regional operations, Pam noted. A supervisor who's been helping implement service cuts while maintaining premium pricing. That's my job, Melissa replied defensively. I follow the directives from management, even when those directives include logging fake maintenance reports to justify removing artwork and antiques from the property, Pam asked, referencing documents she'd found in Hartwell's abandoned briefcase, or falsifying occupancy numbers to make the hotel look less profitable than it is. The color drained from Melissa's face. I didn't know that was illegal. Mr. Hartwell said it was standard practice for preparing a property for renovation. There was never going to be a renovation, Pam said gently, seeing the realization dawning on the young woman's face. The plan was to strip the assets, run down the property, and sell it off to developers who would likely tear it down. Melissa turned to Hartwell, her expression hardening. You told me we were preparing for a major upgrade. You said everyone would get bonuses when the new investors came in. Hartwell didn't meet her eyes. Plans change in business. You know that. What I know, Melissa said slowly, is that you had me fire people who'd worked here for years, good people with families. You told me it was temporary, that we'd rehire them once the renovation started. Pam watched the interaction with interest. She'd seen this scenario play out countless times during her years as a prosecutor. The moment when an accomplice realizes they've been used as a pawn in someone else's game. Ms. Torres, she said, your cooperation now could make a significant difference in how this situation resolves for you personally. For the next 20 minutes, Melissa detailed her involvement in Hartwell's scheme, how he'd promoted her after discovering she had a background in accounting, how he'd instructed her to implement cost-cutting measures while keeping them hidden from guests in the corporate office, how she'd begun to suspect something wasn't right, but convinced herself it was just the harsh realities of the hotel business. I never thought we were doing anything illegal, she insisted, wiping away tears. I just thought we were being creative with the budget. By the time she finished, Brad had heard enough. His voice came firmly through the speakerphone. Richard, you're terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you off the property and to your apartment to collect your personal belongings. A company representative will meet you there. Your access to all systems and properties is revoked. Hartwell started to protest, but Brad continued over him. As for legal consequences, my sister will have to determine those in her professional capacity. But be assured, the company will be conducting a full investigation and will cooperate fully with any criminal proceedings. Pam watched as Hartwell's face cycled through emotions. Shock, anger, fear, and finally resignation. He stood without another word and allowed the security officer to escort him out. When he was gone, Melissa looked at Pam with red-rimmed eyes. "Am I going to jail?" "That depends," Pam replied honestly, "on how cooperative you continue to be and what we find when we dig deeper into the financial records." "I'll tell you everything," Melissa promised. "I still have copies of the original maintenance requests before Mr. Hartwell had me change them." "And emails about the staffing cuts," Pam nodded. "That's a start. For now, you're suspended with pay while we sort this out." After Melissa left, Brad's voice came through the phone again. "What a mess. Dad would be furious." "Dad would roll up his sleeves and fix it," Pam replied, thinking of their father's hands-on approach to business problems, "which is exactly what we're going to do." "You've got enough on your plate with your new job, Pam. I can fly down tomorrow and I'm already here," she interrupted. "And I've got about 48 hours before I need to be back in Washington. Let me handle the immediate crisis." After convincing Brad to let her take point on the situation, Pam ended the call and stepped out into the lobby again. Carlos was waiting patiently, just as he'd promised. "Thank you for staying," she said, joining him in the seating area. "It's no trouble, Ms. Bondi. What can I do to help?" "I need someone who knows this hotel inside and out. Someone the staff trusts. I'm going to be making some changes tonight, and I could use an ally." Carlos sat up straighter, a new sense of purpose evident in his posture. "I know every inch of this place, and most of the people too. Whatever you need." Together, they walked back to the front desk, where Jeremy was now openly playing a game on his phone. He looked up with an expression of annoyance that quickly shifted to alarm when he saw Carlos accompanying Pam. "Is there a problem?" he asked, hastily pocketing his phone. "You could say that," Pam replied. "Where's Thomas Bailey?" "Mr. Bailey left about 10 minutes ago. Said he wasn't feeling well." Pam wasn't surprised. Bailey had looked physically ill during the confrontation with Hartwell, probably realizing his own complicity would soon come to light. "In that case," she said, "I need you to call the overnight manager and any department heads who are still in the building. Tell them there's an emergency meeting in the main conference room in 30 minutes. Jeremy blinked at her. "I can't just call a meeting." "Who are you to—" "She's Pamela Bondi," Carlos cut in, his voice carrying a rare note of authority. "Attorney General of the United States and one of the owners of this hotel." The color drained from Jeremy's face as recognition finally dawned. He'd been rude and dismissive to not just any guest, but to his boss. And not just any boss, but one of the most powerful legal authorities in the country. I didn't realize," he stammered. "Clearly," Pam replied. "Now about that meeting?" Jeremy scrambled to pick up the phone, suddenly the model of efficiency. "Right away, Ms. Bondi, 30 minutes. Main conference room.